Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hello there.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
How many days of school do you have left?
I have today and 6 more.
And we have 2 more episodes before we're done for this season of
We
the
do.
podcast. We're going to take a summer break, a chance to rest and recharge.
Can I talk about one of our trips? If any of you listeners have ever been to Austin, Texas, and if you have any recommendations, can you send them to us?
Yeah.
We are looking for ideas of what to do that aren't just honky-tonks, which is my choice. We're going to be there for a few days with our friends from Seattle that you've heard about, and we're looking for recommendations. So if any of you have been or live or know, share those.
Yeah. And enjoy your summers upcoming. I know some of you are starting to almost get off school. Graduation season is upon us. I know you're looking forward to having a bit of downtime after your mad rush at the end of the season.
Can I ask for one more request?
Yeah, what's that?
What should we read and watch this summer?
Book recommendations.
Yes, if you've got series, if you've got movies, if you've got books, this is my time.
I need some book recommendations.
And I like fluff in the summer. So feel free to give me your best romantic comedies or whatever.
I don't. I want a 26-hour audiobook on information theory. That's what I want.
Not you. We.
Give me the opposite of fluff. So, what are we talking about this week?
Leadership.
Yes.
And learning to be a leader.
Learning to lead.
What it looks like.
It's been on my mind.
And our experiences with some.
Yes.
Both good and bad.
Good and bad. Before we get into the main topic for today, just want to go ahead and remind you, sign up for the 16 to 1 podcast email newsletter. It's where you can get the latest updates, episode announcements, resources, and workshop offerings from Moonbeam Multimedia. That is us. And be sure to do that so you can stay in touch over the summer months. That's how you'll hear from us in between when we are not publishing episodes for just a little bit. If you value our explorations into the art of teaching and the science of learning, please consider becoming a supporter of 16 to 1. By filling out the backer form on our website, you're helping us to produce research-driven stories that challenge and improve our educational systems. And if there's a story in your local educational community that you think we should cover, we'd love to hear about it. Please contact us using our website or write at hello@16to1.com. The cat is bribed. The dog is napping. Now is our time.
Go quick.
This is an example of household leadership right here.
Where'd this come from?
This topic? I was inspired by a real life conversation this time around. I was talking with a local community organizer type person last week, and she was asking what I thought were a lot of really good questions about leadership and about what it takes to get people energized and organized and willing to invest time in their own communities and futures. And also about the challenges about what you do if you want to develop leadership ability. What or where or whom do I study if I want to be an effective leader? Or do I just have to put in time practicing trying to be a leader? And if, how do I do that? If so. Sometimes we answer these leadership questions with like, what are you looking at?
I'm just waiting for us to go in the Wayback Machine.
Are we about... Well, we're about to get in.
I know.
Buckle up.
I'm just waiting for my flight.
It's in like 5 seconds. Ready? Okay, well, sometimes we answer these questions with philosophy or political theory.
And these people are very dead.
Well, yeah, they're super dead. Plato and Aristotle.
They've been dead a minute.
There's usually at least one point in an episode where I'm like, we got to go back to Plato and Aristotle.
I know. Is it more than 500 years old? Chelsea might be interested.
That's true. Some of these are from like the BCE, Confucius and Mencius.
Even better.
Well. Yeah. Well,
is that how you say that?
Mencius.
Mencius.
I mean, I hope
Is
so.
that where Mensa comes from?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. But also, I will tell you, I am saying Mencius.
I feel like that's a very revealing question.
I'm saying Mencius like a teacher of mine said Mencius. So I hope that he said it correctly.
And I believe him.
But anyway, Plato and Aristotle. This is where in high school I sort of started with the whole concept of leadership. I remember very distinctly, I think in junior year, we were taking like a philosophy class. But in Plato's Republic, Socrates builds a city in speech, is what he calls it, which is basically like a thought experiment. It's this ideal and hypothetical and just city. He builds this city, and it's ruled by what he calls a philosopher king. So that's this person who's morally upright and full of virtue, who is selflessly living amongst the people, the community.
What a hero.
As a leader. In Aristotle's Politics, there is this vision of a community life in which civic leadership isn't just encouraged, but is also necessary for happiness amongst what Aristotle calls great-souled men. And you'll hear a lot about in leadership theory about this great man theory, where it's just like, oh, leaders aren't made, they're just born. There's some people who just come along.
Gosh, I've heard that so many times.
Yeah. So anyway, this is some philosophical underpinnings of that type of leadership theory. And then, like I said, we get Confucius and Mencius, and this is hundreds of years, like 500 year BC range, something like that. Confucius also had this worldview where the leader's primary asset is their moral character. And Mencius was one of the most significant interpreters of Confucius, and he says that we can measure the general effectiveness of leaders by the satisfaction of people within a society, which I thought is interesting. Now we're stepping outside of just the focusing on the person bestowed with leadership from on high. We're kind of evolving that to say, no, actually, we have to look at what that person is doing for their community to evaluate leadership. And then I threw this one in here because he's one of my favorite, more modern thinkers on leadership, and that's Machiavelli. Now, when I say he's one of my favorite thinkers on leadership, I do not mean that I think that what he thinks about leadership or what comes out of Machiavellian discourse is good for leadership. I'm not endorsing it. Machiavelli, in The Prince, a very famous book, he looked at this example of a local to him politician at the time. His name was Cesare Borgia, and he examines this guy's leadership from all these different angles. But Cesare Borgia is somebody, and the Prince in general, Machiavelli, who is writing about this hypothetical leader. That person, that leader, is willing to do whatever it takes, including murder in Cesare Borgia's case.
Okay.
Do whatever it takes to sort of hold the leadership thing together. I didn't know this until I went researching for this very episode, but there's this thing in leadership called the Mach scale, which is the degree to which a survey respondent is willing to subscribe to Machiavellian attitudes about leadership.
Oh, interesting.
So, like, how conniving you are. Ooh. I didn't know. And then, outside of these big philosophical traditions, we can look to the writings and speeches of more recent leaders in our world, people like John F. Kennedy Jr., who is this accomplished rhetorician president. He ends up being this architect of civic aspiration. He frames leadership as a service tradition to others. Also included Martin Luther King Jr. in here, a civil rights activist who organized the nation's collective moral consciousness into a powerful political instrument to force changes to racist laws and policies. You had an example in here that's like way more recent. You're laughing, but it's important to you.
I went back 10 years ago, roughly.
Okay. Bring us into the now.
It's a big jump from Machiavelli to this, I might add. Although I would love to know what she would say about this.
But I come from a philosophy tradition.
You do.
You come from an applied classroom leader tradition.
I do.
It's fine that there are different tools.
I just like the dichotomy, if you will. It is a dichotomy. Brene Brown, are you familiar with her?
I am.
Okay.
I am. She's like a sociologist, kind of.
She has a MSW. She has a master's of social work.
Okay.
I have been reading Brene Brown for as long as she's been published. She's kind of my go-to.
Why is that?
Oh gosh, I hate the phrase life coach, but that's like, she kind of comes to mind for that a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know that Brene Brown would say that, like, she might boil down her work to the research of vulnerability and what vulnerability does to people.
Vulnerability?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like how we respond to it, what it makes us feel, what it makes us do. So that was my first introduction to her. So I started reading her book called Daring Greatly. And that was only after I'd been exposed to her on her TED Talk, which I now teach in my classroom. And my students love to watch her TED Talk. Her research deals with vulnerability specifically. And what I think is interesting about vulnerability in this case is like not only what it does to us personally and in our relationship with ourselves, which is a relationship that I have come to value more and more the older I get, but also in relationships with others, coworkers, in my case, students. What works for Brene Brown to me is that She's not only a brain, she's not only a professor, but like I said, I mean, she has her PhD, but she has a master's of social work. That brings such an interesting lens to learning, to teaching, to writing. And she feels more grounded than a lot of other people do to me. And I think maybe some of it's from that line of work. But eventually, Brene released a book called Dare to Lead. Because Brene Brown is required reading in this home, I read it. What I will say about that book is it made me very uncomfortable. And then my next line says, I didn't like it. And then it says, I did like it. And that's exactly how I felt the entire time I was going through. You didn't like it
and you did like it.
I did, both.
Okay,
I
why?
didn't. Well, I don't like to not know. I don't like to be vulnerable. And I don't
You're
like...
uncomfortable with uncertainty?
I am.
Okay.
I think that's a diagnosis in itself. But I think that book specifically, Dare to Lead, is one of the things that finally made me kind of eat all my words and start pushing myself to places and to be in rooms where I hadn't been yet and to be uncomfortable. And that's something I'm very bad at. I am not comfortable with discomfort. I'm not one of those people who thrives, unfortunately. I wish I was. Being a teacher, you'd think I'd be much more used to it than I am.
Well, you probably actually have a higher tolerance for it than a lot of people.
Maybe that's actually what it is.
No, I feel like to be a classroom educator, you just have to. There's like a certain cosmic background noise level of discomfort that is just showing 100%. Up to a classroom where there's all kinds of different, there's so many variables in your space.
There are.
Yeah.
So Dare to Lead, though, the blurb from her website says this: what can we do better? Empathy, connection, and courage to start. And I think that's it. Empathy, connection, courage are all the things that have kind of been in my mind, empowering me to find discomfort and to find places where I might not have had a seat.
So this is a topic where, we have books like what you're talking about, these sort of, I don't know, you use a term like life coach, but just like a general sociological kind of useful and practical applied approach.
Yeah.
We've got textbooks, but we also have epics and poems and plays and literature, paintings, pieces of music, all about leaders and leadership. And our relationships with the people leading us are frequently on our minds, let's just say. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about what the qualities of an effective leader are, but also who gets to decide what effective leadership is. That's something that we define within an organization or within a company or a country? Or do we leave this to academics or people who study these things? Who gets to define who's doing this well? I feel like we're at an inflection point where people are really questioning from all angles the value of credentials. Mm-hmm. So let me just throw out there are, things like graduate programs where leadership is treated as this academic discipline that you can study in and of itself. Like the Harvard Kennedy School, popular, famous, I guess I would say prestigious one, focal point for public leadership. This is the type of thing that you would pursue if you want to rub shoulders with world famous activists or NGO leaders or like heads of state. It's expensive. It's kind of an elite environment.
This is how you get into a room.
And there are similar programs at places like Columbia and Princeton and Oxford and most prestigious research universities. A lot of times within a school of business or public affairs or something like that.
Should I apply? Just for fun?
Sure.
Just to see?
Yeah. I have a friend who teaches at Columbia SIPA, and I gotta be honest, it sounds like a lot of fun.
I was reading about Harvard's. I had about a half a thought just to apply, just to see what happened.
Well, yeah.
I would just love to throw my name in there and just see what comes. And then I had the thought, which was like, what if?
What if you get in?
And then I was like, there's no way. Yeah, no, there's no way I would ever do that. So.
Why? Does it make you too uncomfortable?
I would never get in, first
You gotta dare to lead.
Okay, Brene, when she's here, yeah, well, I'll consider it. See, I had a brief moment of discomfort, and then I was like, no, come back.
Moving on.
Close the book, Katie.
I'm uncomfortable. In the US, there's a powerful and exclusive ecosystem of fellowships and think tanks and other kinds of elite networks where we get policymakers and executives honing skills, places like the Aspen Institute or the Presidential Leadership Scholars, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you get corporate leadership. Listeners, she's making a face. But this is the sort of leadership that tends to be more rooted in structure or formalized hierarchies, or at least perceived hierarchies of expertise and dedication.
Perceived is key.
There's
Perceived is doing
perception
a lot of work in that sentence. Like, it is shouldering everything else.
Yeah. There are also, established credentialing systems for certain corporate environments, exams and certifications for project managers, strategic planners, other kinds of decision makers. There are all kinds of things you can go spend money to take a test and say that you're now certified to do X, Y, and Z, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We have a friend who's a corporate trainer, and I asked about this because I wanted to know the heart of leadership, or, how do you talk about what is most important to leadership in the corporate world? Because that's kind of out of my wheelhouse and out of your wheelhouse. And he told us that it's different in the learning and development space, the trainer space that he works in, versus the more corporate space. He said in the learning development space, leadership is all around experience and educational background and internal development, which he said matters until it doesn't, which I thought was an interesting thing. And then in the corporate space, on the other hand, it's all about grit and results and what's on your resume and your interpersonal connections. He said your network is your biggest benefit. And then he also had a note in here about most of the leadership skill training that they do is either onboarding or whatever flavor of the month leadership training is in vogue.
Yeah.
That was so fascinating to me because I'm like, okay, this is really treating leadership as like a booming industry where you just kind of move through. First of all, onboarding, that is not, I know you can onboard people into leadership positions, but like onboarding and leadership training, I do not think should be seen as the same thing.
I agree with that.
Or if it is seen as the same thing, then you have some sort of organizational problem. But then, yeah, just kind of being willing to go with the flow of whatever is in vogue in leadership land, I thought was fascinating. I guess I just expected company cultures to be more present. I think I expected companies to care more about developing a certain type of leader. So I didn't expect this moment where we have a kind of like generic leadership, whatever, fill in the blank for whatever is trending in leadership today. Yeah. I would have thought something about a company's approach to leadership would have been more timeless than that. Could you tell us a little bit about how it works in the military? High-level overview.
This is very condensed. Based on my limited knowledge, it seems that all branches have some sort of established route of progress. It seems that it's a mix of time and experience, and sometimes some level of randomness.
Yes.
Once you advance your rank in some way, that can bring you a change of your duties, maybe a whole different position, a different pay. So when I was researching about this, I actually found a university. It's called Norwich University. And they have declared themselves as a university with a history of preparing leaders for military service. They actually started their military leadership program in 1819. And they were the United States' first private military college. Their program specifically seemed to include multiple disciplines. There were courses from the public sector, courses from government, and then courses in military leadership. So that's just one university. There are others, obviously, VMI or the Army War College or West Point or one of the other accredited institutions related to the military branches. But I did find they have a book, the Army does, okay, and it's called the ADP 7-0. And it's Training Units and Developing Leaders. And it's a book by the Army Department. And in that book, they have highlighted the 7 principles for developing future leaders.
Okay.
I found the PDF online if you're curious. It's in the show notes.
Great.
So these are the 7 principles that the Army has outlined. 1, lead by example. 2, develop subordinate leaders.
This is so important, and actually one that I really wish social enterprise could figure out. There's so many leaders in local organizing, community development, that kind of thing. So many of those leaders are going full speed, full blast ahead, trying to keep their organizations together, and they aren't doing like basically succession planning because they're just so attached to the mission.
Their 3rd one is create a learning environment for the subordinate leaders.
Oh, okay. So do more of that.
Yeah. Maybe you've written this. Is this yours? Did you publish this? The fourth one is to train leaders in the art and science of mission command. 5, train to develop adaptive leaders. 6, train your leaders to think critically and creatively. And 7, train leaders to know their subordinates and their families.
To know them. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Which I think is important.
As we were researching this, I did keep having the question of like how much the ideal leader or the definition of the ideal leader comes out of the goals of the organization.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that any military branch and the Army in this case, their specific motivators for leadership is obviously much different than other places. But it is a place that I'm sure is a proving ground, a very quick proving ground for some. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I was expecting to find in the Army's book about leadership, but I wasn't expecting like to know them and their families. I thought that was a really interesting perspective, and I think that...
Did you expect it to be more like clinical and kind of not focused on the interpersonal?
Yeah, I expected less community and more of the...
rule following?
Yeah, I think that's where I was. Yeah, I think that's closer to it. The next portion is about educational leadership and what that looks like at different levels. And I didn't know I had such strong feelings about this until I started researching it. The way that I started to address this was by looking up what sort of degrees do these people earn?
By these people, who are you talking about exactly?
Anyone working in higher ed.
Higher ed leaders?
I think both.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of the work of a higher ed is leadership, even if it's not defined. I started by looking at where do these people go to school? What do they study? I focused in on one specifically, Penn State. They have so many options. I could not believe the leadership options. Mm-hmm. They have a master's in educational leadership, and then once you're in the program, you choose to focus in either general leadership, school leadership, or teacher leadership.
What is the... I'm not going to ask you, but I would love to ask them, what is the difference between those things?
Right? They also offer PhDs and doctors of education degrees in educational leadership. Uh-huh. So you can get a PhD or a DED in either.
And what is the difference
Educational
there?
leadership. Well... Did you ask the question?
Is that a loaded question?
That nobody wants to answer on Reddit. Let me tell you.
Oh, okay.
I ended up on Reddit trying to understand the difference in why you might get a PhD versus the Doctor of Education, which I'm just calling the DED. Uh-huh. And it seems to be that, like, there's some beef between those two degrees. Reddit was ugly.
Yeah.
So,
and you might find your way into one of these programs someday. So
I know.
You better get it right.
And I don't want them to hear me. So...
I was going to say, why are you figuring this out on Reddit?
Well, here's the thing. Where else do you go on the internet to watch people with either a PhD or a DED fight each other? And it's Reddit. That's where you go.
Sounds like a cage match.
Okay, it was. The PhD people are, I'm speaking so generally, and I'm so frustrated by this, but this is what it came down to for me. The people who have a PhD, who look at the people with a DED, they do not value it the same that they do a PhD. A lot of it seems to come down to the fact that a DED is a more recent as in like tens of years at this point of offerings, where it isn't as heavily research-based as a PhD. A lot of what I was reading about these DED programs is they are mostly online, and there's something you might do like part-time, whereas many people who are pursuing a PhD, that is your full-time event. They are very different degrees I want to offer as well. So I'm not trying to compare them, but that is where I landed.
Well, how are they different, I guess?
A lot of the people with DEDs were suggesting that it's really not about the education you have, it's about the people you know and the connections you make, which goes back to the point you were talking about earlier. So at Penn State, you can do either. And they kind of have it more for like, if you're going into a PhD program, you might be interested in someday publishing, lecturing, whatever. Whereas a lot of the people with DED degrees will sometimes then go on and use that in partnership with other high-level degrees like masters or superintendent's licenses and things like that.
Okay, the researcher-practitioner divide.
I would say so. That they're not nice to each other and everybody's kicking rocks at each other on the playground.
I think this gets at the heart of the continued credentialing and leadership question that we have. for people who have done these programs, if there's this weird competitive sense of, oh, the PhD students have done the more rigorous research, it's like, okay, well, that might be true, but does the more rigorous research requirement directly translate to stronger leadership capability in the environment where you're going to be leading?
Right.
That's a harder to answer question.
And I think, generally speaking, about a degree, any degree in educational leadership, I think I'm of two minds. Good for you. Great learning opportunity. I hope it was useful. But also, like, what are we doing? I don't know. Are we doing too much at some point?
What are we doing?
I don't know. Can anything be a degree? These are the questions I have. And it seems that maybe it can be. Which isn't to throw shade at these people, but I am at a point, and this is coming from my own personal issues with higher ed and the bloat that comes with higher ed in a lot of universities, and also kind of seeing its effect at my public high school and things like that. I want these things to be valuable, and I don't want them to feel like a cash grab. And sometimes I'm worried that the learning we're doing isn't actually setting us up for the thing that we're most hoping for. And that's how I view the value of any degree, because it is such a expensive thing.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but it sounds like you're setting yourself up to be in a higher ed leadership position, because I'm sure they're asking themselves those questions all the time. How do we select and put together programming for students who are coming through here? How do we put together programs that effectively meet real needs in the real world?
Yeah. So one of the articles that I linked in the show notes it's actually from May of 2020, and it was put out by Northeastern University. And they listed in this that they were anticipating how many new jobs could be expected in the United States by 2023 in higher ed. As part of that article, they listed at the time what they viewed as the top 8 skills for higher education leaders. And the number 1 skill was financial acumen. And I think that's what sent me off immediately, because I'm so frustrated by the fact that building good higher education leaders is not about anything other than making sure they have the money for the thing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to actually value what I value about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely bringing in my own bias to this, and I know that. Actually, most of these top 8 skills for their higher education leaders really frustrated me. And I was actually waiting for you to fly off the handle. So I'm going to wait and see which one makes you fly. Okay, so 1, financial acumen. Okay. 2, collaboration. Building new leaders. Yeah. Communication. Strategic planning. Change management. 7, commitment to diversity. And 8, intellectual curiosity.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm actually fine with these.
I figured intellectual curiosity would have been much higher for you.
Oh, I mean, I think all 8 of these things are important. I didn't know that they were all ranked in order of importance.
Yes. Yeah. And I also, this is coming from someone who's been needled by this quite a bit. I think I've talked about this some, but I have watched my undergraduate institution struggle with admin bloat and positions in higher ed that did not exist even when I was in school, and who I now have many students attend that same university I attended, who are having such a radically different experience than I had. It's concerning to me. It's a warning to me. It's all of these things. So I'm definitely coming to this from a perspective of, at what point are we losing more by these positions and things like that? And then also knowing that in some way, this is how a university survives.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm landing.
I mean, you're pointing out a friction that exists in leadership. You can point to the people who are currently filling the role of whatever, director of something or vice president of something. Those are technically leaders in one way, but they're not necessarily the people actively exercising leadership at the organization.
Yeah.
I think what you're pointing out here is that creating positions for leaders is not the same thing as creating leadership.
I agree with that. And I think that's exactly right. Chelsea, I don't think I could say it any better. I think that my frustration lies in that fact that there are people in these positions who aren't actually leading.
You want educational voices leading in education.
Is that so much to ask?
Let's assume you want to bring them closer together. How do you do that in your ideal higher ed environment?
That's a great question. That's how you do
it.
How
do you get your advancement team and your educational leadership team on the same page?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's probably what all these universities are trying to do. And they're probably struggling to figure that out too.
Well, the more those things become divorced, the more likely you are to end up with programs that don't meet needs,
Yeah,
I think.
You're right. I think you lose connection sometimes in those things because of the chase, right? And I think that that's what I valued so much about my time at my undergraduate were the relationships, it was the closeness that I had. And I see that getting lost. And I'm also coming from a perspective of having read about Ohio State and great length at this point and their turnover after turnover. I mean, I think they've had 2 presidents in the last 10 years, something like that, which is
At least.
we've just watched so much turnover in these places that one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is like how many dollars were spent on these processes and what was gained from it.
Yeah.
You create teams and interviews and you send out headhunters and you do all of this work. I'm sure Ohio State would say it wants stability because who doesn't? You know, like every institution wants stability, but that's one of those things I think about. That's my age showing, I think. Yeah, you're laughing. I know it's right. My tax dollars. Okay, I said it. There's my soapbox. Moving on.
Well, take us through K-12 leadership, because this is where you have the most direct knowledge and experience. I did just want to mention for our listeners, we had a whole conversation with Dr. Jim Mahoney about educational leadership way back in episode 94 of the show. That was in 2023.
Oh my goodness.
We talked a lot about effective educational leadership, and it might be worth a listen. He's a pretty fun speaker. But anyway,
Yes.
take us through your perspective on how leadership works in the K-12 setting and how you are making because you're kind of becoming more interested in leadership as you mature through your career.
Well, K-12 settings, there are a lot of different leaders. Some of these leaders have degrees or certificates for that leadership. Sometimes these people have PhDs or DEDs or masters or whatever. Sometimes they have an admin license. They look so different depending on the function of the school, the size, all of those types of things. I have seen people go different routes through leadership. I have seen people go through admin later in their careers, and I've seen them go to an admin earlier in their careers. And I have seen, this isn't at my school. My school isn't large enough for this, but we don't have like what are called teacher leaders. But one of my admin was a teacher leader at his previous school. And so I've heard him talk a lot about that.
Hold on, let me actually pause you already. You're conflating admin and leader. I know that to some extent that makes sense because those are leaders, but they're also, I want to also give you a chance to talk about leadership outside of administration.
Sure. Again, I teach in such a small school.
There are different tiers.
Yes.
Okay.
For us, they are leaders, but they're also admin or they're also whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the size of my district is also affecting this conversation because I know that in other districts there are teacher leaders. We don't even really like put much stock into being a department lead or something like that. That isn't something that's...
Like a chair?
No, we really don't. And like we have different committees and things like that, and you're usually just kind of like told you're on it. They try to have like some representation of all types of...
It sounds like you're not intentionally cultivating leadership. You're the senior most member of the English department right now.
I am.
Which means congratulations.
Regretfully.
You're the department chair, technically. Whatever. I mean,
Yeah, it does
lead,
nothing to
whatever
do
that is.
Yeah.
Right. But that's what I'm saying.
I get more emails. I don't want that.
Yeah. So I know. No, I'm just trying to elevate what I see as someone outside of this system.
Yeah.
I look at that and I see an opportunity to more clearly define effort and intention to develop leadership.
Yeah.
This isn't necessarily something you just happen into. These are real skills that require real practice and like guidance and mentorship. You're not just born on earth good at leading people unless you're one of these great old men that I hear tell of so often. So anyway, take it
So
away.
often. No, I think the size of my school is definitely a factor in this conversation because if we were talking about one of those larger public schools in Columbus, like a Dublin or something like that, it would be such a different conversation. But in my school, you're paired with a mentor teacher when you get your job, when you first get your teaching license. And so that's kind of your go-to. That was my Terry. We've talked about Terry a million times on here. That proved to be the most important relationship of my career. For me, it was perfect. She's exactly what I needed. I know I'm lucky. That probably hasn't been it for everybody. So would Terry say she was a leader? Probably not. Terry was usually the person to be like, what is it? Do as I say, not as I do. Like, that's usually Terry, because she would be like grading up until the last minute and be like, oh, thank God Katie's ahead or whatever. You know, like that was like a running joke for us. I have seen teachers and I've known teachers to go and get like one of these leadership certificates that some universities offer. And I haven't seen them further anything in the career as far as like a step, a job, or whatever.
I suppose those are effective to the extent that the system that you're employed within values them for advancement.
I have been in rooms where the conversations were like, well, what does that mean? Or what do you do with that? And I think those are good questions, because what does it mean to earn this certificate at a university? And local universities around my school offer these, and they're like these teacher leader certificates, and they would be good if you're renewing your license, earning hours towards your pay bumps and things like that, because they would be CEUs, which is what we need. But I think that there's a lot of growing to do in that field of education still, and what that looks like and how it plays. Sometimes classroom teachers don't see the value in that type of thing as clearly as someone who is moving into higher ed or into some other type of higher leadership position could be more valuable than what it is for a lot of classroom teachers. Not all, but a lot.
I hear you. I too am skeptical, particularly about leadership, because it can be so subjective and organizationally dependent. Yeah,
and I think to what you're saying, I'm still like, who taught you this? Who was the leader who taught you leadership? Like I had a crazy moment. I think I'm like too in my head about this.
No, I had a crazy moment. I went to, I'm not going to name the university, but it's around.
Ominous.
They started a new leadership program. They had a kind of open house for the leadership program. It was a doctoral program.
Okay.
And they had, a couple of these professors give some presentations. And they had a room full of local business leaders and executives to, it was just like a schmoozing thing, like a build support for the program kind of thing. To me, there was a bit of a misreading the crowd moment because they had a room full of local business leaders and executives. And the lesson that they gave was kind of like a 101 first day of being a middle manager type of presentation. I don't mean to bag on it too hard, except to say that told me that the program thought that it was for a different subset of people than what I thought it was for.
Yes.
I thought that program...
There was a marketing disconnect or something.
Yeah, no, it totally was. I thought this was a program for like mid-career executives who know some things about serious leadership within established...
And are like a middle kind of... in
who
between.
Are looking to level up because they understand where they are and also where they want to go, and they want to more keenly hone and develop the skills of leadership. And this was just not that.
Yeah.
There are some things that you can just learn kind of on the job in leadership that have to be earned through experience. And it felt to me like this program was trying to turn all of those things into a kind of checklist of stuff to know about. What do you expect a doctoral level engagement with leadership to be? Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe because we don't have a thing called leadership except in these highly specialized academic areas of study. Maybe because research is a weird thing and a different thing. It does demand its own introductory
maybe so.
100 level in a PhD level course. I don't know.
I think one of the things I always struggled with in my undergrad was these opportunities to go to like a leadership event or to meet local leaders and things like that. And one, education wasn't usually represented.
Okay.
Which made me...
So this is like a networking kind of, like a student networking...
But it always just kind of felt like you would go and meet some very nice people who are important in the community and who are valued. But it didn't feel like I left with anything more than what I went with, other than to shake a hand and to meet them, which
you got a
for
connection.
some...
You got a connection.
Yeah, and so that's nice. But as someone in education, is it nice to know who owns that whatever? Yeah. Have I learned more leadership skills, or have I learned how to like... That's, I think, where the fall apart.
No, you're totally getting, I think, at the heart of this. You're talking about what if for my day job, I don't operate in a space where you become a leader by climbing a social hierarchy shaped in this way.
Right. And a lot of times these are people who do have a PhD or are actual like medical doctors, or they're realtors.
Their intelligence is not in question, is what you're saying.
No, not at all.
Right.
But
it doesn't have to do with academic credentials.
It didn't. And their leadership didn't translate in a way that made me feel like I left learning something to take with me, You know, it felt like it was for a different group of people. And certainly it is. Like, I don't expect it all to all be about me everywhere I go, but I do think that education kind of puts you in a weird spot sometimes, because when you go to these events, these aren't people that represent you or your work or your, whatever.
Yeah, I'd challenge that, though. I don't actually think this one is on education. I think this is a weird thing of industry.
Yeah.
And then people think that this is how it works everywhere. And it's like, yeah, what if you're in the arts? What if you're in the, I don't know. There's so many different ways that you can lead.
There are. And I also think I was much younger when I did do these types of things. And so that today it would probably feel different for sure. And I would value other parts of it. But I remember thinking when I would leave there that, like, I didn't see the value in the moment, and probably others did. And that's important too.
Well, also maybe it wasn't valuable to you.
Yeah. And that's
because
okay.
you were operating in a different space.
Yeah.
This is actually a good transition into this. A little bit about civic leadership, which you're starting to get at. Civic leadership is just taking responsibility for the well-being of a community or a public of some sort. And this kind of thing is, you can kind of go the formal politician route if you want to, but you don't have to. And this sort of thing is often honed by doing things like going to council meetings or organizing committees to get things done in your town, or starting service organizations or things like that. Those are the spaces where you learn about how things work in your government, in your school district, all those kinds of things. That's the way that you get hands-on with the challenges that you actually have to live through. And it can be kind of fun. There's this textbook on leadership. I'll include a link to it in the show notes, but they talked about kind of different types of leadership. You can have a transformational leader. So that's somebody who's expected to come in and take it from one thing and turn it into something else. So you're at an inflection point, your business needs a turnaround, or you're passing the torch. You're passing the torch from like a founder to somebody else.
Some kind of shift occurring.
Yeah. So that's what transformational leadership is. Usually aligns with like values and purpose and visioning and that kind of thing. You can have democratic leaders, a leader who spreads decision making out amongst the members of a team. Communication is pretty important in this kind of leadership style. You have servant leadership. This is sort of like teacher leader adjacent, I think, but this is the leader who tries to prioritize a team working together well and productively, conflict resolution and community well-being and that kind of stuff. I think that sounds like your leadership style, personally. I agree. Autocratic leaders, that's somebody who kind of rules by dictum. You're the person in charge. There's a clear separation between you and the people following you. And then this last one, laissez-faire, the hands-off approach to leadership that usually only works in highly trusted and pretty agile teams where people can be pretty autonomous in their decision-making. So do you think I got you right? I think you're a servant leader.
I think so.
Type of leader.
I think teachers are just by definition.
I don't know about that. I know plenty of teachers who are more of the autocratic leadership style, for example.
Maybe it's just the teachers I'm around aren't, so maybe that's why I'm thinking of my current, friends and staff, and I would say since changing how we run the media program and now that I have a co-teacher for it, we've been, I would say, working towards a laissez-faire model. We've had some setbacks. We've had some trust issues. We've had to work through some.
This is with your students, you mean?
Yeah, we've had to work through some decisions we've made. Probably a little less laissez-faire, but it's a dream. It's a hope. What would you say for you?
If I were to describe myself ideally, what I would strive to be would be somewhere between democratic and transformational.
I think that's pretty reasonable. I would say you are very democratic.
I get really uncomfortable when I feel like I haven't at least tried to understand consensus or a consensus building process hasn't taken place. That doesn't mean that I will always agree with
but you want to hear it.
Yes,
definitely.
I feel it's very important to have everybody participate in a fair, deliberative process. You have to have time and intentionally carve out a space for people to be able to express all different parts of a problem before you can find a good solution to it.
Yeah.
That's very democratic. I think there are probably plenty of people who would look at my leadership style and think that I take way too long to make a decision. I could definitely be slow at times, but I think I am deliberative. And I think it would serve certain interests in the long term to be slightly more deliberative than we often are, because we're always in a rush to the next best thing or to the next slice of profit or to the next graduating class or whatever it is that we're racing toward.
I think that I'm definitely not as patient and deliberate as I could be, but I would like to be.
All things in moderation, to borrow from the Greek guys we were talking about.
Those Greek guys, yeah. Those famed Greek guys.
So let me ask you, do you think it's a skill that can be...
I don't want to answer that question.
Honed?
I don't like that question.
Like, how do you think you can... All these programs, all these credentials, all these systems oriented around making people better leaders, do we think that those actually do something?
I don't think everybody should go.
You don't think everybody should go? Oh, so you're the great man leadership. That thing that you thought was disgusting at the beginning of the episode, you now think is the truth.
Allow me to elaborate. I take it all back. No, okay, here's what I think. I think that everybody is a leader, but I don't think everybody is the leader that is needed at whatever point. There are different leaders suited more and less appropriately in a situation.
Context is very important for the effectiveness of leadership.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe anyone could be a leader, but I don't know if they are the most effective leader in that moment, situation, whatever. Because I have seen weak leaders be good leaders in multiple places. So I actually don't feel like it's like a great man with a great brain is born and whatever. I think it's a skill. I think it's like any other muscle, right? It atrophies if not used, and it gets stronger and better when used.
Yeah. It sounds like, though, what you're saying, that part of what makes leaders effective is them having the ability to recognize that their style of leadership is best suited to this problem or not.
And to that group of people,
right.
Or to that, yeah. I think that's definitely a factor for me. And I think
how do you hone that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hope somebody else answers
Here's
it.
Okay, please. Answer. You have to dispense with defensiveness, like, altogether.
But how will I protect myself?
Plenty of people, if you listen, will complain about you, especially if you give them a free pass to do so.
They're going to say it.
Open a comment form or something. You can hear about yourself if you want to. Now, you have to ask yourself, do I trust and value the opinion of the person expressing this thought? Which could be yes or no. But, like, a lot can be learned if you're being more curious about the people you're leading.
I think this episode is at a really bad time for me personally, because I had a situation at school recently where a student's experience of me is so unlike anything I've ever heard about myself. And it was really hard for me. I'm obviously not quite over it yet. I kept trying to frame myself in their experience in that moment. Is that true? And it might have been. They might have really felt those things about me. And I think that's why it was so hard, because I had to sit in that discomfort and know that really might have been their experience of me, even when I truly do not believe that's who I am. And I think that that's what you're talking about by opening yourself up to whatever way in which you receive feedback about yourself.
Well, it sounds like it's hard for you because you're not divorcing it from identity.
No, and I mean... Do leaders do that, though? Do leaders divorce their leader?
Yeah, I think this thing you're touching on...
This is what would make me a very weak leader, too, might I add.
But this is more about teaching, is what I was going to say, than leading specifically.
It's also pretty bound up in my identity. I'll pay you my copay
You think
later.
You think those things are very related?
Yes.
Teaching and leading.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. What is a teacher if not a leader? I don't know. That's a question.
Uh-huh. Well... Okay.
You are very good at receiving feedback and divorcing yourself from the thing you're receiving feedback from, and it not being personal at all to you. And I really relish that about you.
Your experience of me is very different from my internal
That's probably
experience
true, but I think you're very intentional in that way.
I try to be.
But I'm saying I think you're much better at it than I am. Well, even though what's in your head is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask. It sounds like leadership is about values. For you, and there's values conflict happening for you in some of these things. Is leadership about finding out what we value and about organizing people around upholding those values. And
Yeah.
if there are people that are not upholding the values, then how do you confront that?
Yeah.
Teaching is a good example of how this is true, that like charisma can also just be one important way that leadership is communicated, let's just say.
I was thinking when you were talking about MLK, JFK, those things came to mind. That was a huge part of their identity, was their skills, you know. And so what is JFK if he can't deliver that speech? And who is Martin Luther King Jr. if they don't deliver those speeches?
I wish that we thought in a more concerted way about rhetoric. It's wild to think about how mass media has changed how we think about rhetoric. There's a lot more noise and a lot less signal, but I'm with you where people come across as much more strongly equipped for leadership when they communicate a certain way.
I agree with you. I think that's...
But I have to ask myself if that's really what I think makes good leadership, or if that's just been my cultural experience of narratives around strong leadership. Do we really need somebody who can stir up a crowd effectively and move hearts? Like, for sure, for certain kinds of goals.
This is a part of the teaching that I do with my students about the rise of Nazism in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of that conversation because one of the things they were very effective with was their propaganda, and many of them were very good public speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And
is it because we equate well-spokenness with like trust?
I don't know if it's trust or if it's... Yeah, I guess trust is a good word.
Trust, or like, I don't know, what is it that people are identifying with?
Yeah,
there?
I think trust is a good word.
Because this is like a question I have about these goofy influencers that acquire some kind of sway over people, whatever it may be. Same question there. Like, how exactly are you able to do that?
Mm-hmm. Who's listening? And what does that say to you?
Yeah.
And like, what do they speak for you? Yeah, I think about that too.
I worry about that. That's what keeps me up at night.
It's a good one to worry about.
Speaking of worrying and what keeps us up at night, let's just round this out with some of the most important lessons about leadership that we felt like we have learned so far.
Do you want to start? Or you want me to?
I'll get mine out of the way.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a non-exhaustive list, but this is just
okay.
Leadership can be fine-tuned by repeated failure.
I like that.
To the point where maybe it's a requirement, not just like a nice to have, that you go through cycles of failure.
Mm-hmm.
Repeated failure is what gives you the confidence to anticipate and meaningfully react to problems that pop up. There are going to be so many road bumps, so many in the path of leadership. Second thing, I have asked a lot of people over the last couple of years, I would say, about local leadership. I have talked to so many mayors, just like tons of mayors. All of them have communicated this idea that leading is about lighting people on fire and inspiring and directing their energy to solve important problems in a community. That comes with learning to share authority, which is not just assigning tasks. There's a difference between stewarding a vision and micromanaging people, and that is actually very hard to learn where those boundaries are.
Yeah.
Third, rituals, rules, and shared narratives, and sometimes organizational structures themselves aren't just boring, stuffy things. They're this kind of supporting architecture that helps groups stay together in the long term. And then fourth, and I sort of said this before, but complaints are opportunities to improve.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I had one more. And that's that every leadership problem is an iceberg. Every one idea, great, big, grand idea that somebody has to improve something, there's just a knotted mess of
below it,
trying to figure out how to get people to work together to solve all kinds of different things underneath. All right, what about you?
Well, I think that one of the most important, maybe the most important, is that leaders can learn from anyone. I think sometimes people are too far from who they're leading. And I think that it's always valuable to allow others to be heard and to be vulnerable in those places, right? Like what we were talking about earlier. I think leadership is a lot of vulnerability. If there's anything I've learned about the leadership I do, because I like to just handle things and do it myself to make sure it gets done. And leading is quite literally the opposite of that.
Making sure nothing gets done.
It's making sure somebody else gets it done and that you've done enough to make sure that...
Gotcha.
That's a hurdle for me personally. The best leaders I've worked with and know are people that were in it with me. They were at the table. They were in the conversations. They were part of it. And I think that in a school, that's really important because that separation between teacher and admin is a dangerous place sometimes. And I think that the best work I've done has been with people of all levels being willing to sit together. And
So you're saying like strong leadership actually comes from dissolving stratification,
I think,
at least in your
in my
your
experience,
workplace.
it has been. I don't know that I would say that everywhere. I think it's important everybody has that voice, and maybe that's the democratic leader in me coming out in that way. But I think in education that has been true.
All right, you ready for what we learned?
What did you learn?
I learned the word stentorian.
You did? Who'd you learn that from?
Nick Offerman.
There you go.
That man loves vocabulary. We were watching Good Hang.
Him and John Hamm.
He and
They
John
both had great.
Hamm, yes. Stentorian, I learned that. It means speaking with a loud or having a loud voice.
You're very stentorian at times.
At times,
Yeah.
but not very often. That's what I learned.
I like that one.
What about you? What'd you learn?
I learned that the reason that a giraffe's tongue is the color it is because it is the melanin to protect it from a sunburn. Because a giraffe's day is so much about eating.
I don't think I've ever paid that close of attention to the color of a giraffe's tongue.
Well, now you know.
Now I know. Okay, anything else before we head out?
No.
We have 2 more episodes left in the season.
God willing. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Goodbye.
Bye. Hello, listeners, and thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of 16 to 1. This show is produced by a 2-woman team. Your co-hosts Katie Day, our lead researcher and social media manager, and Chelsea Adams, that's me. I edit and produce the show, and I also make the music you hear in our episodes. Visit our website at 16to1.com for show notes and resources, or to get in touch with us. 16 to 1 is sponsored by Moonbeam Multimedia, a firm that partners with civic innovators, educators, and mission-driven organizations to help create stronger communities.
I'm going to hate this episode. Everything I've said, I've questioned.
No, that makes it good.
I disagree. My tummy disagrees.
You're learning to live with discomfort.
Brene.
Brene.
Okay.